ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how. Well, hello there and welcome to yet another FileMaker tutorial video where you are going to learn more about FileMaker Pro. My name is Matt Petrowski, bringing you these tutorials from my website, FileMakerMagazine.com. In this video, we're taking a look at not just get last message choice function, but how to effectively add dialogues into your FileMaker solution. Let's take a look and see what I have. Alrighty, here we go. Thank you for joining me on my desktop here. You can see we're working in a copy of FileMaker. It turns out that I'm in FileMaker 19 when I'm recording this video, but for the most part, the get last message choice has not changed for a long time. In fact, here in FileMaker, we can always access the help by going up to the help menu, and then we choose this option right here, show FileMaker's help. I've already done that, and we have the help that comes up here in this window. Now, anytime we are looking for understanding anything about FileMaker, we are simply going to the functions reference, which we can see right here. As I click that and it loads, I could take the time to search through this, but quite honestly, a Command or Control F is going to be my friend within the browser. I'll do that right now, and I'll type in last message, and as it highlights right there, we can click on it immediately and get to that particular function. So, if you have not spent any time in FileMaker's documentation, and the reason you're wondering about the get last message choice, well, this is where you go, the documentation. So as we scroll down here, we can see that this originated in FileMaker 6 or earlier. I haven't even noticed that about the documentation, but quite simply, there's our description right there on screen. 1 for the first button, by default labeled OK, 2 for the second, and 3 for the third. Now, this is pretty easy because there we go. There's the dialog and there's the matching values right there. So it's pretty simple in terms of how this works, but there's much more to using this than just knowing what the documentation says. So let's go through an example. This will be a follow me example where you follow through what I do in FileMaker and we learn how we should take advantage of FileMaker's dialog box and the get last message choice function. All right, so this is the follow along portion. If you need, just go up to the file menu up here up at the top and choose the create new option. You can create a brand new file and follow along in this particular video. Now, I'm also going to go up to the file, I'm going to go to manage, and I'm going to go to scripts. You will notice that in my copy of FileMaker over here where we have a lot more keys, you may not have the same number of keys that I am showing on screen. That is because I take the time and opportunity to modify FileMaker so that it's easier for me to remember, such as Command-Shift-A for accounts actually accesses the security area. These can all be added in the Macintosh within the File Control panel or in the Control panel for your keyboard, which is right there. So you go to Keyboard, and then within this section, you have an area called Shortcuts where you can select, then you can choose App Shortcuts. Let's zoom in so we can see it right there. And you can see that I have one called FileMaker Pro App. And all I've done is taken the opportunity to rename menus so that those menus are easy to access. So I didn't want you to be confused about that. All right, so we are looking at our scripts, which I'm going to need to open up. I just used Command-Shift-S, same thing as going to that menu, and we are now going to create a dialog. Any old script will do. I'll just title this blank for right now. We'll make this a little bit smaller so that we can get it all on screen when we add the step. All right, so I am going to, when a script is active, we have this blue line, I'm going to make sure and click in this area right here, or make sure that I'm in the script and editing the script, because hitting the return key will add a new step for me. I can then start to type. For me, I always type dialog, but one thing you should know is in the scripts, you can type SCD. FileMaker works on shortcuts. So if I did type SCD, it would jump directly to that particular item. Or if you get part of the item, which for me is dialog, I get dial, and you can see that it's adding dial phone, but you type in that O and it goes right to dialog. So either way works for you. If you like the shortcut, you can do that. I like the word because it's easier for me to remember. So our custom dialog simply works like what we've already seen. The get last message choice. Let's see if I can make the dialog even a little bit smaller. It will not get smaller than that. We'll just back off the zoom a little bit. This dialog simply corresponds to button 1, button 2, and button 3, and that's it. All we have to do is simply say what is the last choice that the user made in terms of this dialog. So let's just put in some simple text. We'll type in, hello, which do you like, right here, and then we will simply put in some values. Apples, oranges, and bananas, if I spelled that correctly. So we have to remember that the default button is get last message choice 1, 2, and 3. I mean, the values are right there, what we just saw in the documentation. Now, there's one thing that's interesting about FileMaker's dialog, and is this right here, this commit data. This didn't used to be here going all the way back to older versions of FileMaker, but it turned out that you could have a record that would be opened. Say a user goes into a field, they start to type something, that record is opened, and then when FileMaker added triggers, you were able to bring up a dialog. Let's say each time that you typed a letter, you were going to use a trigger that was the onObject modify for a particular field. So each time that you typed, you wouldn't do this, but you'd bring up a dialog. Well, FileMaker made it so that you could choose this option to commit data. Now, this commit data is very important when it comes to either the record or the process needing to be committed after the user clicks on one of these buttons. So let's say in the previous example, we had OK right here. OK would be a confirmation. That commit data would be able to commit the record data without having to use a commit record step. Whereas the cancel, which FileMaker defaults to, does not have the commit data. Also remember that when you are working with input variables, which we can see right up here, FileMaker calls them input fields in this dialog, but FileMaker supports more than just input fields. We can also put an input variable, and we'll take a look at that. So we'll go with this right here. Which do you like? Apples, bananas, and oranges. Right now, we don't really have to have any one of these turned on because we're not using this dialog within the context of a record. We're using this dialog just in the purpose of getting a response on those buttons. So as a result of this, there is something that the user is going to click. And right after this step is the only time that FileMaker is going to be able to receive that get last message choice. Now, a lot of users will start with this. If get last message choice, and then we'll say equals 1, then they would do something else. Let's play with setting a field. I don't have a field, I believe, right now. Let's try a set field. And I don't know that I have one, but I can specify one. Hopefully can I create one here? I cannot create one in this dialog. We'll go ahead and take the opportunity to go create one really quickly. Fortunately, we can do that very quickly here. And I will type in result. It's all the way down there in the bottom right there. We'll say OK. And we'll say save. So, and we'll put that on screen. I've gone into layout mode, and we will just drag our result field here on screen so that we can see that. Now, what we will do is we are going to set that particular field of result. We're going to specify the target field. We want to specify the result. We're going to say the result of, and this could be whatever we want. This could be a value from another field. It could be from a value from a variable. In this case, we know that apples was what they chose. We'll say apples are great. And we say OK. So in this situation, what we have is a dialog is going to show. This dialog is going to say, hello, which do you like? It's going to give the options of apples, oranges, and bananas. But the only thing that's going to happen as a result of clicking any of these buttons is this step right here, because the only message we are looking for, or the only button we're looking for in terms of a click, is this number 1, or the very first button. We can see that when we run this script by simply clicking the run right here to have the dialog come up. It'll ask us to save. I hadn't saved the script. Our dialog comes up, so get last message choice would be 1 would be here, 2, and then 3. If I click 3, nothing's going to happen because I don't have any conditions that says do something if button 3 is clicked. But if we run that again, which I'll click over here and then we'll run it again, if we do click 1, we're then going to get the result set right here. It's doing exactly what we told it to do. It is doing that follow-on step of apples are great. So what we need to do now is we need to determine how are we going to deal with this logic within our script, because there's a bunch of different ways that you can deal with this. I could take the time to use another if statement. It would look like this, else if. And this is a very simple way of saying I'm going to handle all of the possible things that could be a result right here. And we'll duplicate this and duplicate it again right here. And as you remember, we can always double click in our dialog. If we don't remember, double click. Okay, 2 was oranges. So for 2, we'll say oranges are healthy. And did I spell that right? I did. And then on this one, we know that, and if I can spell this one, bananas have potassium right there. All right, so this is now just simply going to have a response for each and every possible time that I click the dialog. We'll move this off to the side, and we'll move this one off to the side just so I can click between the windows really easily. So we run this, and we say oranges are healthy. We click this, we click it, bananas have potassium. So the script is doing exactly what we want to do, but it doesn't stop there. There are more efficient ways to deal with dialogues, and there's many ways to script your get last message choice. So let's take a look at an alternative approach. Now, whenever we're working with scripts, it's a great idea that if you like the code that you have, everything that I've highlighted there, there's no real reason to change or destroy it if I want to play with this code and try an alternative approach. I can very easily click duplicate all of this code, and then all I have to do is if I don't want this code to run, there's 2 options that I have. I can comment it out, which is with the command / or control /. That code simply won't run. Or another great scripting trick is to simply run an exit script right there. Now what happens is this code, everything after the exit is still live, but we'll never hit that code because this step will get out of the script before it even has the opportunity to run. So what is our alternative approach? Well, without these right here, we can move our if statement up here where we had apples, and this is a perfectly viable approach, which is an alternative to this one. And it really just boils down to what is the flow of your script and do you like how it reads? Because I will do this one. Now I'm going to select the opening and the closing if. I'm going to duplicate those 2 times, and then I'm simply going to run the script or drag them up in between, and after these, I will simply make a space. So on this one, we need to change our result to 2, and on this one, we need to change our result to 3. So effectively what we have now is we have the exact same thing that we have down at the bottom there. Except in this particular case, what happens is FileMaker is, let's think about the flow. The dialog is going to be shown. The user is going to click the button. FileMaker is then going to go to this step, and then it's going to go to this step, and then it's going to go to this step. Let's see what happens if the last message choice is retained, even though FileMaker moves through all of these steps by the time it gets to this 3rd step. And to be honest, I don't even know because I don't typically code my dialogues this way. I'll be showing you the ways that I do it. We are going to run this script, and we are going to click bananas, and nothing happened. Why did nothing happen? Well, it turns out that the get last message choice, even though this is a completely viable way to code our logic, the get last message choice is actually lost after this script is run. So, or this step. This step runs, the get last message choice executes, or it retains its value of what you had clicked. This step runs, but by the time it gets to this end if, it has already lost that last message choice. So this is the next phase of what I would say is a little bit better of a way to use dialogues, and that is to choose to use a variable to capture your value right after it happens. And I'll give you a little tip as well in terms of what I'm doing here, because it is predominantly used in one other very big area in FileMaker. So we're going to use a set variable, and we are going to set a variable of something that's easy to understand and read right after that dialog. Now, a lot of the times in my FileMaker programming, I will use the same type of wording that FileMaker uses, but in this case, I don't. What I mean by that is I could type in message choice, and then I could say that the value is going to be get last message choice. And I believe I typed that right. Yes. So what I've done now is I'm allowing myself within this script to persist throughout the remainder of the script what was the choice. Now, this is a great way to approach your FileMaker scripting because it makes your scripting very easy to understand. So in this case, we're going to go and simply copy this. I opened it up so I could copy this, and I'm now going to simply swap this out. Because I've preserved it, I've now made it such that this logical structure will actually work. Where formerly the dialog would execute, the last message choice would be captured, but just for the immediately following step, then it would be lost. So if I don't capture it into a variable, which I am now, it was lost to me and the rest of the script. But in this case, I have preserved it, and I can use it in this type of structure, which sometimes makes a little bit more sense. Sometimes later down in your script, deeper down, you still want to know what was the choice that a user had made from a dialog. So let's go run the script now, and we will choose bananas, and we get bananas have potassium. Actually, in order to test that, I should have gone like this. Let me do this really quickly and tested that my code is what I was saying it was, because I didn't actually, knowing that it was setting to a dialog, get last message choice might have been saved. I might be wrong in terms of what I was saying, but the whole point was I wanted to show you this particular programming construct is being able to preserve your choice, which makes for a lot easier to read code. So I needed to clear this out to validate my performance here. Bananas, get last message choice actually is preserved. But even if it wasn't, what I'm showing you is a better way to program. We never want to assume that FileMaker will remember our result. We want to take it upon ourselves and remember the result. So in this scenario, even though get last message choice is held onto, by the time that we get to this, I was wrong when I stated earlier that it would be forgotten. This is the better choice for programming by far. Not only because it is much easier to read, but because it just makes it easier for us to make scripts that are easier to understand. So right here, get last message choice, we will change that back, and we're effectively doing the same thing now. We'll go over, clear our result, and we'll run the script. And bananas have potassium, we'll run the script, and oranges, everything checks out and it works. So what is the logical progression beyond this? Well, that's going to be creating a wrapper script for your dialogues, because that's going to afford you the greatest amount of power and flexibility. What's a wrapper script? Well, stick around and we will be learning that right now. All right, so let's take our FileMaker coding and let's up it a level. Let's make sure that we are going to set ourselves up so that we have something that is much more flexible than just using the straight show custom dialog and the get last message choice. When you're programming a much more complex FileMaker solution, many times you find out that you end up using a particular script step like show custom dialog in multiple places in your solution. In this scenario, what I've done is I've made another script right here. This first one has my constructed structure. This other one has my previous structure. And I'm simply just capturing my value like I suggest that you do. And then this is just a different structure. Now, what happens is if I have just 2 scripts right now, if I had 50 scripts or if I had 100 scripts and all of them were using the show custom dialog, how many of those scripts do I have to touch if I want to go in and change how that show custom dialog is working or behaving? Let's say, for example, I had done something where I was in the habit of copying and pasting steps or whole scripts, and the ones that I copied did not have the commit turned on. Well, I now have to go into at least half or however many of those 100 scripts and actually go modify the result. This is where we get into a situation where it's much better to create a wrapper script, which is us wrapping a script around a core FileMaker functionality. So I'm going to make a new script, and I'm going to call this script my dialog. And you can just call this whatever you want to call it. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be emulating everything that FileMaker's dialog script does, but you are passing that into the script. So the way that I typically do my scripts is I name them like functions, and I pass things in, not all of them, but most of the time. And what are the things that come into a dialog or a particular dialog? Well, usually there's the title, the message, and the buttons. Now, buttons, there can be multiple of, or if I wanted to do this, I could do all of this as one big chunk of data. And that's what I am going to show you how to do here. Dialog data, or I'm just going to call it data for short. Now, this is a little bit of an advanced technique, but it's something you absolutely need to know how to do, and that is to use JSON in order to pass something into a script. So in this script, one of the things that I'm going to have is I'm, of course, going to have a dialog, a show custom dialog, but before that, I'm going to need to have some things that that dialog is going to use. In particular, when we look at the dialog, it is all of the components. It is the title, it is the message, and it is the buttons. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some variables up here up at the top. Set variable called title. We don't need to have a value right now. I'm going to duplicate that, and we're going to bring that up, and I'm going to have a message. And then I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to have a button, but I can have a button 1. And here I've got a button 2. I double click there, accidentally expands things. Button 2, and then I will duplicate that and have a button 3. Now, it might seem redundant for me to do all of this and simply say, why am I going to put a value into this just so that I can have that value go into this so that I can call this script from another script? Trust me, when you get to the point where you want to make small modifications to something that you're using across your whole FileMaker solution, it's much easier to have it in one place than it is sprinkled in a bunch of different places. So I'm going to set up the JSON, and I'll do that separately because I'm not going to explain JSON, but we will see how we call a dialog. But more importantly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the result of this dialog for you to have this such that you can use this dialog in a way where you support multiple languages. Right now, what we have coming into, or if we take a look at our original script, right now, this dialog, it is literally limited to English. If I ever wanted my solution to be used by any other language, and I understand that your solution may never need to support another language until it does, we want to be able to have a flexible dialog with a dynamic value that comes into the script, and then the dialog itself also dynamically presents what we want it to present. And that's what I'm showing you how to do right now. So in our dialog, where we're passing in some data, we are going to now simply put in those values as placeholders. So we can see that we're going to capture a title. What's going to be in the title? Well, it's going to be the title. What's going to be in the message? Well, it's going to be the message. Now, this is abstraction, and this is what we're doing in order to make a part of FileMaker dynamic and reusable. So, of course, what do you think is going to come in for button 1? It's going to be here, button 1, and then I'm going to put button 2, and then button 3. So what we've done now is we have abstracted this, and I'm going to leave this commit default on. What we have done is we have abstracted this such that the dialog now is fully dynamic. So we are going to say, what happens when the user clicked a particular button? Well, let's use a set variable. We're going to need to use the getLastMessageChoice. So I'm going to say button clicked, because that's what the user does. They click a button. And I'm going to say getLastMessageChoice. Now, in the rest of our script, what isn't as useful is the values of 1, 2, and 3. We can bypass this by putting a function around the getLastMessageChoice. There is a function that allows us to determine what the user picked by using choose. Let's take a look at this. If we have a getLastMessageChoice and it results in a value of 1, we can, and that's not easy to understand within our script, we can modify that 1, 2, and 3 to be equal to something that we want it to be equal to so that our script reads really well. We can do that in a couple of ways. The one that I like the most is using the choose function. Now, the choose function allows us to have a test. It's 0 based, so this is result 0, and then we have optionally, everything in between these curly braces is optional. We can have many more results. Well, in our test, if we paste in our getLastMessageChoice, we know that getLastMessageChoice results in a 1, a 2, or a 3, because there's only 3 buttons on the dialog box. This particular function wants a result 0. So how do we make a 1 a 0? Well, -1 equals 0. And then, of course, a -1 here equals 1, and a -1 here equals 2. So look at that. We've got 0 would be right there. We've got 1 that would be right there. And we've got 2 that would be right there. So in this particular situation, we simply need to take that -1, and we're going to say the getLastMessageChoice -1 will be my first result, my second result, and my third result, and so on. And this makes it easier for us to write readable code. So what we can say is we can say whatever we want here of what these typically are. And I'm just putting these in right here. Literal values is what these are called. I'm literally putting a string. Let's put other here. So what's going to happen now in the rest of my script, as you can see, is we will come into this script. We will hand this script a title, what we want to show in a dialog, a message, and button 1, 2, and 3. These can be whatever we want them to be. They can be English, they can be Spanish, they can be another language, they can be nonsense. The key here is we're simply going to determine what of these 3 happened, and then what do we want to do as a result of those 3, regardless of the language, etc. In this scenario, using default, cancel, and other, or mapping is what I'm doing. I'm mapping the getLastMessageChoice to a human readable value right there, such that my result can now be, and there's no reason for me to simply replicate the structure that I already have created. Where did I already create this? Well, it was over in this script right here. Why don't I just take all of this right here, copy it, go back over to my script, and I'll just paste it, and now I'll just modify. So now I can actually say, and I always like to just copy things, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to say if getLastMessage, or if button clicked equals, and I could say default. And then I can take that same thing here, and I can say cancel, and then I can say this here. Now you may be saying, and rightly so, but Matt, if you're making this script as a general purpose wrapper script, why are you putting default, cancel, and other? Well, we're only doing that right now as a learning lesson, learning how to use the choose function to map the get last message choice to any one of these values. Because what we're going to do is when we pass values in, these values are going to swap out for button 1, button 2, and button 3. If you can see the logic of how that works, we can determine by passing in whatever we want into this dialog, then whatever the user clicks, we take a corresponding action. So here, let's change this to something that makes more sense. Button 1 was clicked. And this is going to be English right here because that is what we're working in. But you will see that we can supply any of the languages that we want that would be coming in. And we will get our result. So let's swap this out now. Let's put in here the default of button 1, button 2, button 3. So we will take this, and since we've learned the lesson, we're now creating this such that button 1, and I'll simply copy that, highlight here and paste, make that 2, go here and highlight that and paste right there. So if the user makes a click, we get the last message choice. We reduce it by 1 because that satisfies the choose function. Then what we're going to have is we're going to have button 1 returned as our result. So what we are able to say is if button clicked equals button 1, we're going to do this. And otherwise, we're going to do this. And otherwise, we're going to do this. So I know it seems confusing, and it really doesn't start to make sense until you start to use it. But I'm going to set up the data. I'll do that separately in JSON, and we will see how we can variably pass in and get the result that we want from this script in terms of what's happening and using this dialog and the get last message choice. All right, so let's start breaking down what we've done and how things work. Now, I know that this, if you are brand new to FileMaker, what I'm showing you here in the latter part of this video is going to seem super convoluted, and why go about this. And it's my hope that by showing you what I'm about to show you, you will get an understanding and an appreciation for this abstraction that we are doing. Yes, a simple dialog is super easy. We simply use the script step, we show the dialog, we can capture the result, and then do something with the result through the course of our script. But when you get into more complex FileMaker solutions, you need something that's a little bit more flexible, and that's where this wrapper script comes into play. So what we have done is we have essentially wrapped our script around the FileMaker show custom dialog. We already saw that we're simply just putting in placeholders of variables such that when they come in and dynamically they're whatever we want them to be. But there's a secondary benefit of using this. And there's one little feature that's really pretty nice, as you will notice. In this dialog, we are specifying all 3 buttons, but these button values are variables, and the trick about variables is that they don't have to exist. In fact, they don't exist unless they're actually created. So when we have a calculation here that says JSON get element, if that element doesn't exist, then the variable won't exist, and if the variable doesn't exist, then FileMaker will not show that button. So if a value is not in button 3 won't show. It makes this a little bit more dynamic in that our code When we write it as text, we'll either show the button or not show the button based on whether we have a value or don't have a value for that particular button. And you'll see right here quick coming up. So our script, everything that we have here is a wrapper. Now, here I need to explain what I'm doing here. I'm not going into JSON. If you're interested in JSON, go over to the FileMaker magazine website, do a search in the search area, search for JSON. I have lots of articles about JSON. But essentially, we have coming into this script, we have a parameter. We're setting a variable. We're using FileMaker's getScript parameter. We're saying, is that parameter or is the data in that parameter valid? And I'm using a JSON format elements and checking to see that it's valid. If it's not valid data, meaning we're not going to be able to get anything out of this, we really don't want to show a dialog. So we're exiting out of the script. And the intention here is that every time we call this dialog, we're going to be the ones creating the data and sending valid data. Usually this is predominantly used when you have inbound user data, which is still a good idea to do even with your own code. We capture all of our values that go into our dialog. We show the dialog with those values. We capture what the user clicked in the dialog. We then determine if what they clicked is equal to what we passed in, and then we return the result of either 1, 2, or 3. Why 1, 2, or 3? Because we're simply just emulating what FileMaker's native functionality does if we were using just the script step. Don't worry, you're going to see the value of doing this. So in order to create a dialog, we are simply going to be calling our own script. But it is no different than what we've already learned. This sequence of these two steps is almost exactly the same as show a dialog and then set a variable of message choice, or let's just go choice for easy, to get last message choice. Can you see? It's the same thing. Step to make a dialog, step to get a result. Step to make a dialog, step to get a result. But where's our benefit? Well, our benefit is this. By putting the dialog into our own script as a wrapper, we get to do many more things than just that show dialog. Remember, if I have a simple script, or if I had 100 different scripts, and every one of those scripts used the show custom dialog, I have to go in and touch every 100 scripts in order to get them to say or do or be something different, because my code or my logic is right there inside the dialog. But if I abstract it out and put it into a dynamic situation where I pass that all those values into the script, it makes it much more flexible. And we can see that by walking through an example right here. So I have a set variable. That variable is my dialog data. Remember, the dialog wants some data coming in. Well, that's just all of the pieces to the puzzle. So we'll take a look at this code. I wish it would quit double-clicking and zooming out. I need to fix that. I have a title, and it is personal info. I have a message. Do you have a middle name? I have a button 1 and a button 2. I do not have a button 3. Yes and no. Well, let's take a look at this other step that I have commented out right underneath it. Dialog data. Información personal. ¿Tienes un segundo nombre? I hope I'm saying that right. Sí o no? So we have the ability now, using a show custom dialog in a wrapper script, in order to pass in either one of these. And this logic could simply look like if language is equal to en for English, or we would basically say if it's equal to that, we would have an else if, and it would look like this. Language is equal to es. I think that's right, España right there. So if we have a setting in our FileMaker application, and typically what I do is I typically have this situation where I'm using a double $sign, and it looks like this in my programming. So when my application loads, my FileMaker solution, I look at a user record. That user record has a preference. That preference has a language such that when that language is detected, then I'm able to say, well, if it's this language, pass in this. If it's this language, pass in this. And then go run the dialog and then simply get my result and then do whatever you want with the result. So if we run this script with the debugger, we can see what happens is we'll run this. It's not going to have a language right now. I need to actually set that in order for this to happen. What we'll do is we will simply just push this out to the beginning and we'll pretend that that code isn't there. I hope you understand I would have a language. So we run this script with the debugger. We set our dialog data. That's been captured. We now pass that to our script. Our script gets this parameter. Let's look at the data in our data viewer. I'll get rid of my watch variables over here and move this on screen so that we can see this, so that it helps us out as we step through this. We'll actually put this so that when we zoom in, we can see it. So we're going to set the parameter. We're going to go to current. So there's parameter. It's coming in. You can see that. You've got the yes, the no, the message. Do you have a middle name? We say, is this valid? Yes, it's valid. It's valid data. So we're not going to exit out of the script. We're going to now capture the title. What's the title? Well, it's personal info. What's the message? Well, the message is, do you have a middle name? What's the button? It's yes. What's the button 2? It's no. What's button 3? There is no button 3. So when we show this dialog, because there's no button 3, what happens is the dialog's going to come up, and there it is right there. Do you have a middle name? Yes or no? We click no. Because we clicked button option number 2, that's exactly what's going to happen. Our button clicked is getting captured as a result of get last message choice. Our choose function is actually saying button 1, button 2, button 3. That's just off screen right there. Button 1, button 2, button 3. So if you clicked button 2, get last message choice is returning 2, which is returning button 2, which is setting that into button clicked, which button clicked is going to be equal to what actually came inbound. So then we advance this. We will see that button 1 is not what I clicked. It's bypassed. Button 2 is what I clicked. And we're exiting this script with a value of 2. So now we come back to our main script where we're running just those 2 steps, just the same way as using a show dialog. But in this case, rather than saying get last message choice, we are saying get the script result of what this script, my wrapper, around show custom dialog is returning. And we would then, for the rest of the script, be able to do whatever we want. And the script would continue on. Now here is the very big takeaway. It is not only the fact that we can set variable values coming in, meaning in this, our dialog, let's show a great example right here. We're working in our solution, and this value is a calculated value. It could come very much, it could say hello, and then you say concatenated, and it comes from a field. You say customer name. And so basically you're able to dynamically blend in your data, which you could very easily do within a regular show dialog step. But what if this needed to be, the other language? This can all be dynamic. How you write the code is completely up to you, of course. But the biggest advantage of this wrapper script is this. By putting all of this in a script and not calling this step individually, I get to modify this script in the lifetime of my solution to do whatever I want it to do. If I no longer wanted to use a show custom dialog at this juncture, I could come into the script and so easily comment this out and I can now switch to using a new window. And that new window could very easily be a card window. And I just map the same buttons to do whatever I want. I modify this code in one place, in one script, because my wrapper is something that I control. I don't control FileMaker's show custom dialog script step. FileMaker controls that inside of itself as an application. I want something I can control as the developer. What if I don't want? Well, if I'm using the new window, what if I wanted to capture into a log every time that a user clicked a particular button or a dialog was actually shown? Let's put in a comment right here. Replace with logging steps. So this step right here could be a sequence of script steps that goes over to another table and logs each time that the user shows a particular dialog, or what the hour is that a user clicks a particular button. Whatever you want to capture about the process of a dialog, you now have control because you've put it within this wrapper script. So I hope, without going into all of this craziness and making it confusing, I hope you're walking away with an understanding that the benefit to you is not just learning the get last message choice function, but learning how to approach FileMaker script steps, at least those in particular that you use many, many times over and over and over again. If you do, such as a step like show custom dialog, then that is a key indication that you could make this a wrapper. You can wrap something around this functionality, abstract what needs to go into it, such as using variables, and then get your input and your output working the exact same way that FileMaker does, but yet gain a really significant degree of control. So as always, I'd like to wish you much luck with your own FileMaker development. Feel free to check out the rest of my videos over at FileMaker Magazine. And until next time, much luck and happy FileMaking.
We hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial, and we'd like to say thank you for your subscription and your support. If you're not already a subscriber, head on over to www.filemakermagazine.com/subscribe for more information about the benefits of joining.